HOA rented out my home while I was deployed, so my entire platoon took it back in uniform. The sun hung low over the quiet cul-de-sac, painting the sky in hues of amber and regret. Sergeant Ethan Caldwell had dreamed of this moment for 18 months, returning to his modest Virginia home after a grueling deployment in a war-torn desert. His boots, still dusted with foreign sand, crunched against the gravel of his driveway. But as he approached, his heart sank. The front door was ajar, and unfamiliar voices echoed from inside. His home, his sanctuary, was no longer his. Ethan had entrusted his house to the Meadowbrook Homeowners Association, HOA, a seemingly benign group led by Karen and Tom Whitaker, who promised to oversee his property while he served overseas. He'd paid every fee, signed every form, and left with the assurance his home would be waiting. Instead, he found strangers living in his space, his furniture replaced, his photos gone, his life erased. The Whitakers, he learned, had rented out his home to a young couple, the Harpers, pocketing the profits while Ethan dodged bullets half a world away. Fury coursed through him, but Ethan was a soldier, trained to channel rage into action. He called his platoon, men and women who'd fought beside him through hell, bound by loyalty thicker than blood. Within hours, they arrived 20 strong, in full dress uniform, their medals glinting under the midday sun. The sight was a declaration of war, not with weapons but with presence. Ethan stood at the forefront, his jaw set, his eyes burning with betrayal. The Harpers, oblivious to the deception, emerged from the house, confused and defensive. Karen and Tom Whitaker stood behind them, clutching a stack of forged documents, their faces a mask of smug authority. "This is legal," Karen snapped, waving a lease agreement. "You abandoned your property, Sergeant. We followed protocol." Her voice dripped with condescension, as if Ethan's sacrifice was a mere inconvenience to her HOA empire. "You stole my home," Ethan said, his voice low but sharp, cutting through the tense air. His platoon stood unwavering, a wall of honor against the Whitakers' deceit. Neighbors began to gather, drawn by the spectacle, whispering and filming from their porches. The cul-de-sac felt like a powder keg, ready to ignite. The confrontation escalated as Karen doubled down, her voice rising. "You soldiers think you're above the rules? This is my community." Tom, her silent shadow, nodded, emboldened by her audacity. The Harpers, caught in the crossfire, looked shaken, their eyes darting between the soldiers and the Whitakers. Ethan's platoon sergeant, Maria, stepped forward, her voice calm but lethal. "You profited off a soldier's absence. You call that community?" Then came the twisted neighbor, Mrs. Delaney, an elderly woman who'd lived on the street for decades, hobbled forward with a manila envelope. Her hands trembled, but her voice was steady. "I've been watching the Whitakers for years," she said. "They've done this before, targeting vulnerable homeowners, forging documents, skimming fees." She handed Ethan the envelope, filled with evidence. Emails, bank records, and complaints from others the HOA had swindled. Mrs. Delaney, a quiet widow who'd seemed insignificant, became the linchpin that turned the tide. Her courage, born of years of silent observation, gave Ethan's fight a new edge. The revelation hit like a grenade. The crowd gasped, their phones now aimed at Karen, whose facade cracked. Tom stammered, trying to deflect, but the evidence was damning. Ethan's platoon tightened their formation, their presence a silent demand for justice. The Harpers, realizing they'd been duped, stepped back, their faces pale with guilt. "We didn't know," Mrs. Harper whispered, her voice breaking. "We thought it was legit." Ethan could have pressed charges, could have let the legal system grind slowly. But he wanted his home back now. With the neighborhood watching, his platoon began moving the Harpers' belongings to the lawn, methodical and disciplined. Each item, a couch, a lamp, a child's toy, felt like a reclamation of Ethan's life. The Whitakers protested, threatening lawsuits, but the crowd's murmurs turned to jeers. The HOA's reign of petty tyranny was crumbling. As the sun dipped below the horizon, Ethan stood in his reclaimed living room, surrounded by his platoon. The house was bare, the walls marked by strangers, but it was his again. Yet the victory was bittersweet. The Harpers, though misled, were now displaced, their toddler clinging to Mrs. Harper's leg as they loaded a rental truck. Ethan's heart twisted. He'd fought for justice, but at what cost? Karen and Tom slunk away, their empire exposed. But Ethan knew they'd face no real consequences. People like them rarely did. He sat on the floor, the weight of the fight settling in. Maria placed a hand on his shoulder. "We got your back, Sarge. Always." The platoon's loyalty was his true home, more enduring than any house. But the sting of betrayal lingered, a wound no uniform could shield. The cul-de-sac fell quiet, the neighbors dispersing, their videos already spreading online. Ethan wondered if justice had been served or if he'd simply traded one loss for another. The HOA's greed had cost him peace, and the Harpers' innocence had been collateral damage. Mrs. Delaney's evidence would fuel a lawsuit, but Ethan knew the system favored the cunning. The fight wasn't over, it never really was. What do you think? Where does justice lie when everyone claims to be right?